What's up, YouTube? It's been a few weeks since I put out a video, but I have been quite busy, unfortunately, with my job. I'd like to quickly say thank you to everyone for sticking around, despite the lack of content. Initially, I wanted to do a toxin mask for this video, but I was unable to just due to the sheer volume of work I've had to do between putting in 60-plus hours at my job and then trying to get my family's cosplays ready for the convention that I'm going to, January 19th, 2019. And then I thought about it and decided that I would do another Red Hood mask, partially because I haven't done anything that is more focused on the Rebirth side, and I really do enjoy the Rebirth design. And so did Cosplay Noob, and I wanted to give him a quick shout out. I'm going to dedicate this video to him. I also want to give a shout out to, I believe, Jessica Yoder for pointing out the Necronomicon in my Venom video, even though it's been long past that, but I'm still giving you a shout out anyways. And this one I wanted to do more of an articulated brow, and I did minimize the size and shape of the forehead versus what a lot of the 3D printed versions look like. And I also altered it to fit, my head a little bit more snugly than something like that would. I didn't want something bulky, and I didn't want to look like a bobblehead. I know I say that a lot on here. But without yammering on anymore, let's just go ahead and jump right into the build. Okay, so first thing you're going to need to do is cut out all your patterns, and you'll notice on the patterns it says inward angle cuts, inward angle cuts, inward angle cuts. Anywhere it says that, that is exactly what it means. All the other cuts are straight cuts, whether they're V cuts or whatnot, on the pattern pieces. And you'll notice there's also registration marks, which I then transferred onto my final pattern pieces. And just to show you on the foam what I mean by the angles, this inside edge is cut at an angle like this, and the other outside edges, like this edge down here, is flat, and of course the V cuts are flat. Same on this piece here. The inside or top piece here is flat, and inside here you have this sloped angled cut. And you're going to need 2 center pieces, 2 side pieces, and 2 mouth pieces. And before I start gluing shell pieces together or anything like that, the first thing we're going to want to glue is all the V cuts, all the basic V cuts, like here and here. We're not going to do these brows yet because we have to do some heating and forming to it. Also the V cuts here, here, and here as well, and here as well, and on the chin on all the pieces. Go ahead and glue all those first. And to glue those, I am using DAP Weldwood contact cement. It also comes in a smaller bottle, but I just keep the bottle for the applicator brush and usually use this. And the way that works is I'm going to spread the contact cement with the brush on either side of the V cut, let it rest for 15 minutes, and then join them together. However, if you've never used contact cement before, I want to warn you that it is a one and done process. So if you glue these off or misaligned, you want, for example, this edge, this top edge, to match up with this top edge whenever you're gluing your V cuts together. If you get them either off this way or misaligned some other way, you're stuck. You have to recut it and start over. Alright, now that all the V cuts have been glued together on all the various pieces, you can see it's already begun to give it some of its shape, at least in a basic rudimentary sense. Of course, the final shape you'll need to use a heat gun, which is why I didn't glue these first. Just glue the regular V cuts. You'll notice here these are flat and I did nothing to. And these I have heated with the heat gun and curved them. It's hard or almost impossible to do all 4 individual ones at once and put that type of curvature and shape into them for the brow area. So what I do is I isolate one at a time, put my heat gun over it, get it nice and hot, and then curve each one individually into shape. Now next, once you've heated these, go ahead and apply your contact cement and glue them all together. When you glue them all together, you need to get this edge here to form a straight line from piece to piece as you glue them all together. I will go ahead and heat this side and glue them all together. And I'm also going to glue together the mouth pieces right down the center, applying contact cement to each, letting sit 15 minutes and then applying. And I'll come back and show you what that looks like. Alright, I have glued together the mouthpiece And here is what I have done with the areas that I've heated and shaped. Like I was saying, you need to glue them so that this here forms as straight of a line as possible. And the reason why there's no hash marks on this is once you start heating and stretching it, it is not going to 100% match up anyways because you're misforming the foam, which is fine. That's actually what you want. You don't want them to look identical. It's supposed to replicate a brow, and a furrowed brow is not completely identical on both sides. Now on the back side here, I did take a little bit of super glue and put it in the cracks and the gaps here from gluing it together just to give it an extra layer of reinforcement on top of the contact cement. And next I'm going to go ahead and glue the two center pieces together using contact cement. Right, I now have the two center pieces glued together. Next I'm going to glue the sides to it. Lining up my hash marks as I do so. I'm going to glue one side and then go ahead and do the other side. I don't want to try to do both because once I put the contact cement on both sides, if this falls over or something, it will get dirt all stuck in the contact cement. So I'm going to glue one side on, then the other. Okay, so I have glued on each side piece, and now I will lastly connect the chin area here together prior to gluing in the actual mouthpiece. And for the mouthpiece, I will start at the center on the bottom and work my way up. And finally, of course, I will be applying contact cement and connecting these two together. Alright, so I've glued on the mouth area, and I did overlap it a little bit, particularly on all the corners. That was intentional, since this is part of the definition. And just lined up my hash marks and glued it all in. Now, I have not yet glued in the eyes here. I just had it set in place. And next I'm going to put contact cement on these, line it up, and glue those into place. Alright, now that I have the nose area glued in, once you press it in, you will notice that there is already somewhat of a little nose and brow point once you line it up along the center line and push it together. And now what I'm going to do is take this canvas hat making mannequin head and go ahead and put my red hood mask on it. And this is the heat gun that I use to heat up and do the initial brow shaping. And now I'm going to use this to take some of the point out of this and where the seams are. And it helps to have a canvas mannequin head. You can do it without it, but it helps to have it so that you can press in a nice, consistent round shape. And just using my hand, I can pretty well begin to smooth out the foam and begin to take a little bit of that point out of it and start to round this off. I'm going to go ahead and use my heat gun and begin to work over the whole piece, mostly concentrating right through the center here to get all this nice and round. And then I'm going to work on individual details like pulling out the cheekbones and eye socket area and pushing the temple and just giving it all around definition, heating this and squeezing it in to give it more of a nose, and heating and pushing in some of the below the cheekbone area on the side of the mouth, have that cave in some. Okay, starting from the center of the forehead here and working just all this through here, you can see it is much more round, particularly in the areas where the seams are. I'm going to use a Dremel and then hand sand to help smooth that out the rest of the way before covering that particular gap and seam there. And pretty much same right down the back. Just heated and smooth as much as possible to prep it for sanding. Now, next thing I'm going to work on is heating the eyes. I'm going to take this brow furrow that I started to put in here, and it's going to follow up, arching up here over the eye. Going to have some eye socket areas raised out with some temple area pushed in, and work on the cheekbones and heating and defining the nose area more, and all around curving the eyes inward somewhat. And I'll come back and show you what that looked like and give a quick description of how I did it. Okay, so to juxtapose the detail here, this side is totally flat. I have not done any heat forming to it, except I did push in the nose a little bit. But flipping over to the other side, I have done some heat forming. And just to get a look at it here side by side, you can see quite a stark difference. So, as I said, I heated it here on the outside and pushed my finger in on the inside so I could follow this brow line up. And then from the outside, I heated around the eyes and pushed it in, first with the top to finish off the brow, and then on the bottom. And I also pulled out around the edge here for an eye socket, and then heated, and it's subtle, but pushed it in here for the temple area. Then I also heated somewhat and pulled out where the ear area would be, which is right here, following up off this seam. I heated and curved this under to follow the curvature of the jaw, and then heated and pushed this in. This here, I heated and pushed out with my knuckle to get the cheek area, which corresponds with this point here. I also heated on the inside and outside to help give the nose area some more shape. And as I said, I already did that on both sides. I also did a little bit of work on the chin as well to help smooth and even that out. But there it is, heated side and shaped side versus unheated and shaped side. And that's the difference that using a heat gun will make. I get a lot of questions about hair dryers. Yes, you can use a hair dryer. It takes much longer to heat up the foam. And in areas like this, I get the heat gun very hot, get the foam itself very hot very quickly in a small area, then immediately push and pull in that shape. It's next to impossible to get that kind of definition and look with a hair dryer. You kind of need a heat gun for that. So once again, there is my on-video explanation for any of those watching that have not attempted something like this before. Alright, so now that I've gotten both sides of this heated and shaped so that they look the same, more or less. I'm not a 3D printer, I'm a human being, but got the detail shaping on the cheeks and everything pretty much the same. Eye sockets, temple, cheeks, etc. Both sides. I took my X-Acto knife and I did a few cuts. And what I did was I followed the line that was already present from the seam up and over to kind of form a brow crease. And I did a similar thing here and here as well on both sides. And of course on this side as well I carried it over. And you'll probably notice too, I took my X-Acto knife and freehand I cut some lines in, some detail lines, going down and then down the mouth and around, and following on the inside of the seam, also up here all the way to the back. And next I'm going to take my Dremel and start sanding, followed by some hand sanding as well. To sand this, I have my Dremel 4000, and I usually put a medium to fine grit head on it. This one is a medium grit head. I definitely suggest not using coarse. It will leave lines in your foam from the direction that the wheel is spinning. You don't have to have a Dremel. You can use anything from a belt sander to just hand sanding the piece, which I'm also going to do after I do the Dremel stuff. The Dremel work is just to get out some of the bigger areas, and then I smooth it out by hand sanding with it on the canvas mannequin head. Now that I've finished with the Dremel, I have sanded everything, of course, except for the cut lines that I put in it. And this seam right here, I did sand a little, but I didn't sand the seam out. Whereas here, I, of course, sanded it as flush as possible to get it smooth as possible, and help take out the rest of the bumps that I couldn't quite heat out. And even that still requires some hand sanding, so I'm going to go ahead and pop it onto my mannequin head here, and I'm going to use a sanding block that is 320 grit. I'm going to start with that and work my way down to some 600 grit. Right now that I have hand sand, I also took my heat gun and went through and heated the areas I sanded so that they would be more shiny and more flush with everything else. And as I heated, I also used my hands to help smooth out any of the rough areas and did the best I could to get out any and all little Dremel lines. You can still see a little one right there. And the lines in here I'm not so much worried about. Next we're going to move on to is filling in some of the seams and gaps that we don't want, like the one right down through the center here. And this other one right here on the chin I don't particularly like, and the other seams down here as well we're going to put some silicone on. Right now what I'm doing is I'm going to cover up some of these seams. This is of course optional, and if you sand really well and you don't have much of a gap in your seam, you don't really need to do this. And what I use for this is a stuff called DAP Alex Plus Fast Dry. For this project I'm actually not going to be using the Fast Dry. However, if you don't use the Fast Dry, you really cannot sand on this, the regular Alex Plus. And what the Alex Plus is, like I say, it's from a brand called DAP, D-A-P. It is the same brand that makes the Weldwood contact cement that I've been using throughout this. And it is an acrylic latex caulk with silicone. So it's latex and silicone mixed together, but it's acrylic, so it's water-based. What that means is you can put some on and then dip your finger in water and smooth it out, which will help you cover the seams, or at least help make the seams not stick out so much. And like I say, the main seam I'm focusing on is right through the center in the front here and right through the center there. I'm also going to fill some of the stuff on the sides. Now you may notice that this stuff is a dark red. That is because when you get it in the tube, it comes out a kind of a whitish color. I mix red paint with it, which turns it pink. Okay, I did this for Carnage, but I've been doing this after it, simply because when it goes on wet, it's pink, and when it's dry, it has this nice red color, and that helps me know 100% that this is dry before I try to do anything else to it. Now, this stuff does come in a caulking tube. I simply put it in my caulking gun, squeeze out all the excess, and then when I want some, I simply dip my finger in it, and I use my finger to spread it out over the area that needs the application. Okay. Once I get it about as even and spread out as I can using my fingertip, I will then further smooth this out with dipping my finger in some water. And I have a container here, just a spare Tupperware. Of course, I'm never going to use this for food again now that it's been used for this. But I get all the excess silicone off my fingers, and I dip it in the water, and with my wet finger, I just use that to help smooth it out and make it look as even as possible. Now, like I was saying, if you use the Fast Dry, once it's fully dried, you can sand it. However, you can only hand sand it, and you can only go so fast. With this stuff here, which is the normal dry, I can't sand it. So it's kind of a one and done process, which is why I generally, unless you're pretty experienced with using this stuff, I generally recommend using the Fast Dry if you're not very experienced. But if you do things like this, like you say do pottery or sculpting or clay or anything like that where you're used to smoothing out things to get it nice and consistent with your finger. I've been doing this for about 4 or 5 years now, and I've done it enough times that I feel confident enough that I don't use the Fast Dry anymore. I use the regular dry, which is this. But like I say, when it dries, it has much more of a latex-like texture, and it is quite hard to, or well, not just hard, it's pretty much impossible to sand. So like I say, it's kind of a one and done. And here you can see the dry stuff is a nice dark red, and all the wet is pink. And like I say, that's also a visual signifier that it is ready or it is not ready. I'm going to go ahead and layer and apply as many applications of this as I feel is needed to help smooth out this seam. Now, if you're not using the Fast Dry, less is definitely more. Heck, it's less is more if you're even using the Fast Dry. As this stuff dries, it tends to shrink because it is water-based, and as the water evaporates, it ends up shrinking down somewhat. So you may still see the seam, and you may have to do 2 or 3 applications to get it as smooth as you wish. Or, as I said, if you choose, you can just skip this step altogether. As long as you sand it really good, you can't see the seams very well. They're actually pretty well hidden, but I'm just particular like that. And I also use it to fill gaps. You see here, there's this hole here. This hole isn't actually from me. It is actually from the foam itself and the manufacturer, but it's also all the foam I had left in my bin that was large enough to use for this project. So I do the same thing. I go ahead and I fill the hole, and then I just get my finger wet, and my dog is trying to help, but she's totally not helping by licking me. But yeah, she's cute, so whatever. Get my finger wet, and then I just smooth out this area. Like I say, come back and check it once it dries, because once it is dry, these gaps and such
they're just not going to look exactly the same as when it's wet, because like I say, it does shrink. Alright, so I am happy with the way the silicone turned out. It has effectively covered the seam. And like I say, my main concern is just right through the center, because I really do want these seams to still be apparent, but I did not want this center seam to be apparent. Now I'm going to move on to sealing this, and to seal this, I'm going to use a brush and some Mod Podge. A lot of times I would just use generally Plastidip for this, but due to the time of year that it is here, even with heating up my garage to around 70 degrees, I still had problems spraying it. So due to that, I am not going to use Plastidip. I'm going to use Mod Podge. I'm going to brush that on. In a separate container, I have mixed together some black acrylic craft paint with some Mod Podge. And once I do one layer of this, I'm going to do one layer of that and turn it all black. Alright, now that the mask is ready to be airbrushed or painted, however you wish, like I say, climate and conditions permit, and you can always just use Plastidip. And you don't have to use an airbrush or airbrush paint if you don't have one. Simply getting like spray paint red or like some pearlized automotive red spray paint from like an auto parts store like Advanced Auto Parts or AutoZone, etc. Would save a lot of time. But I like to use my airbrush and control what I do, and I have some transparent Createx bright red that I did mix with a bit of the transparent deep red. I've thinned this out with distilled water, and what I'm going to do is layer some of this on and gradually build it up, and in between I'm going to add on some Wicked Colors Wicked Silver, layer that in between, which will hopefully give it some depth and a pearlized look. But like I say, save yourself some time and effort and just buy a paint like that. Alright, now that I have it looking the way that I wish, on camera it is showing up looking much more brown than it looks in real life, which is weird. That could just be my lights, I don't know. But I am now going to clear coat it, which will help the metallic and the other aspects of it pop a little bit more. Alright, and I don't know how else it's going to show up, but you can see the metallic showing through a little bit on camera. It still does look oddly orangish brown on my viewer here versus the actual red that it is. Like I said, it could be my lighting. Weird. But overall, I am pretty happy with this. A couple things about the airbrushing that I will point out is that you'll notice I left it darker along the seam lines here and did not put as much paint onto all that. Initially I was going to go back through with a black wash, and that's something you could do if you want to have more definition on that area. Using acrylic black wash, you just wipe it into, say, the lines and areas where you want, and then you just wipe it off with a cloth. It usually stays in the lines, but will come off of the outer surface. So this isn't quite dry yet, I gotta let it sit overnight, but in the meantime I'm going to start working on the actual eyes. So for the eyes, I took my eye pattern, which I put onto cardstock, and traced it out onto some 3mm EVA foam, and then took some ribbon here, actually meant for wrapping gifts, I believe, and I cut out a couple rectangles, and I then doubled them up, put one on top of the other, put a bead of super glue around the eyes, and just let them lay there into place, and let it sit for about a half hour. Came in and checked on it, and it is now glued in there good. And I did cut these here on a bias from this side, so that when you look at it,
The eye has a little bit of depth and dimension. Now I'm going to go ahead and glue these in. Alright, so I think this looks much better in the light in here as opposed to the light out on my workspace, which is making it look quite orange. That was really bothering me. But yes, I glued in the eyes. And for that, I just simply used some regular household super glue. I put it on the inside and then positioned the eyes where I want them and glued them in. And in here too, I think a little bit better, probably see the pearlization and metallic effect a little better in this light. Now I'm going to go ahead and try this on and see how it looks. Okay, so that pretty much wraps it up for this video. Hopefully as everybody is excited as I am for the new Punisher season coming out. I have a feeling that Netflix is probably going to axe that show just like they did all their other Marvel-related properties, which is sad. Particularly Daredevil, which I felt the last season was really, really good. And I guess it's great to end on a high note in that sense, but yeah, I don't know. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the mask. As always, if you want, you can look down in the description and click the link to the Facebook pattern and take those photos and put them through a program or such and turn them into your own patterns. Or if you like, you can always check out the ones on Etsy, but if I do the work, of course, you have to pay. But you do have both options. And it was a lot of fun making this one. I really enjoyed it, especially the painting process. Now I have a newer airbrush that works a lot better. And I want to say thank you to all the new subscribers and all the continuing subscribers. I really do appreciate it. It does keep me going and doing the channel. I'm going to do cosplay regardless, but I may not always do videos. And as far as upcoming projects, I have mentioned Toxin. I want that to be the next video, or as it has been dubbed, as I've noticed recently, the Raisin Venom. I think that's funny. But also want to do possibly a Hellboy hand. I've been posting pictures of the current one I've been making on Instagram. That one was all done freehand, and the fist is fixed. The fingers do not articulate. I would like to actually do a video on one, but I would prefer that it's more comic accurate and more similar to the one in the new trailer with David Harbour as opposed to the one with Ron Perlman. I like the six-sided Right Hand of Doom from the comics. I am a big fan of Mike Mignola and his art and the comics, so that's some upcoming stuff. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. And if you're not a subscriber, please consider it if you enjoy cosplay and cosplay builds. And as always, thanks for watching.